Welcome back to the Open Peace Podcast. Today we're joined by Ysabella Hazan. Happy International Women's Day.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, clap. That's what a strong, independent woman needs from you, Cain, you patriarchal bastard.
No, man.
I'm clapping for you, Jared.
Exactly.
I'm clapping for you making some progress.
What do you mean, me making progress? Fuck off. Anyway.
It was fun. It was nice.
Yeah, it was.
Lovely.
So,
Isabella, why don't you start off by sort of explaining where you come from and your background a little bit?
Cool. So thank you guys for having me.
Of course.
No problem.
I'm from Montreal. I'm in my second year of law school. And so you guys heard me through Adal's The Great Debate with Mohammed. And I like to do bridge building work. And I think it's something that we do more and more and normalize each other and add empathy to a talk that really is missing in a conversation that, it's missing a lot of empathy, a lot of feeling for the other, humanization. So I try to do that. I started a movement called Humans for Humanity. And it's a movement that does good, apolitical. We just do good stuff. And it's a place for Zionists to be in progressive circles because, the Z word is often like, oh my God, it's a bad word. But really, it's two-pronged, Jewish self-determination in Israel. And I can say I'm a Zionist and I love Palestinians. And I know that my fellow Zionist friends feel the same way. So through Humans for Humanity, we've done some good work like that. And now I work with Honest Reporting. So I just got, that's pretty much it. That's a Spark Notes version. It's always a hard question to ask, honestly. But
Sure.
Here we go.
Yeah. I mean, mainly just want to talk about, family history. So like you call yourself a Zionist. Have any of you ever lived here? Were you born here and then family left? Like family ever lived here? You speak Hebrew? Like what's the situation?
So to me, and I think to most Zionists, I don't think living in the land at the moment is what, makes me or anyone a Zionist. So I know a lot of people have different definitions of what Zionism is. And sometimes it's a word that's triggering, and I can understand why. But when we break it down, Zionism is two-pronged. The self-determination, Jewish self-determination in Israel. It's the Jewish civil rights movement in a way, the Jewish indigenous liberation movement. So as a Jew, I feel very connected to the land. I pray every morning towards the land. And to me, that's what a Zionist, well, being a Zionist means is that I believe in the right to Jewish autonomy in the land. It doesn't mean I don't believe in Palestinian autonomy. But to go bring it back to my family, I was raised with these values, with a strong connection to Israel. And I guess that's what it is. My grandmother loved Israel. It's actually funny. So I'm Moroccan. Couldn't tell. No. Not exactly Ashkenazi. Not Polish.
I've seen some brown Ashkenazis.
That's true. That's true. That is very true. But I'm just gonna go with the general here. My grandfather has 14 siblings. All 13 of them went to Israel, and my family came to Montreal. So I always find that very funny. So it's an interesting question.
Okay, so whenever you come over here, you have a lot of family to visit then, Ysabella.
I do, but I don't though. It's not really good. I actually stay with my one cousin who's from Montreal and made Aliyah. It's ironic.
Yeah.
We lived on King George and Yafa in Jerusalem. It was my favorite summers.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, with that much family, no surprise.
I was
14 siblings.
I was gonna ask because I watched the Adal's Great Debate thing, and I saw there was a lot of talk there about the word Zionism, and like you say, a lot of people have defined it in their own way. But don't you think that since it's our word, right, the real definition of it should be ours to determine? And there's a lot of people that try to claim ownership of Zionism, even though it's nothing really to do with them.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better. As Jews, we also need to be more, especially in the diaspora. It's not the same as in Israel. I see it on campus. Jews need to be in charge of their story and telling our story clear, as in empowered, not just activists, but as a people. And Zionism should be defined by Zionists. And the way the term is demonized is also, it's unfair. And not only that, it's wrong and it's an impasse to peace. And in that debate, what I realized afterward is, had I not used the word Zionist and probably just used, like I mentioned, the two-pronged thing, self-determination and stuff, Mo would have no issue with it. It's just as we're conditioned, and it's some things that we have to unlearn. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't use the word Zionism. Absolutely not. But it just takes the extra effort to explain. Like I also mentioned in that debate that when I used to see the keffiyeh as a kid, I didn't associate with Palestinian liberation. I would associate with the pictures of the protests on the Gaza border, the riots. That's what I would associate with. So when I would see that on campus, I would have to unlearn a lot of things too. And that's what it's all about, I think. You know?
Interesting, because Ysabella, I don't know if you heard about the Samaritans. I lived with the Palestinians, and also I have an Israeli ID, so I'm kind of like, I lived in both worlds. I lived through both worlds, but a lot of Palestinians refer to Israelis as Zionists, and when I hear that, when I used to hear that, it makes me like ask, like in their head, like, is there a difference, or why did they use this term? Or so it makes me think about it. In a sense,
it's interesting because Jews are Zionists, and there's the exception who aren't, but the exception is not the rule. And that fringe minority of Jews who rejects Jewish autonomy shouldn't speak on behalf of Jews. And the same way that the word Zionism is redefined shouldn't be how we see the Jewish people, and we know those negative things that Zionism is defined with. And
usually they refer to it with like. I think it's, for them, it's like the occupation. They always connect it to the occupation. That's how I feel when
like contempt that they feel towards it.
A lot of them use it that way.
In a weird way, I kind of appreciate that, because I feel Palestinians who live in the West Bank, the Samaria, or in Israel proper, have obviously a better understanding of the conflict, and I've had a much easier time connecting with Palestinians who live on the land as opposed to Palestinians in the diaspora. And I went to Tel Aviv University, and I had so many Palestinian friends. My hairdresser was Palestinian. Girl who did my eyebrows was Palestinian. Like, and when I would come back to Canada and I would share this, he'd be like, "Oh no, apartheid! You're lying. It's absolutely does not exist." So when I hear a Palestinian have a bad feeling towards Zionism, not that I agree with it. I understand that this is the narrative that's been taught, the same way I've been taught a certain narrative as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, like that's also kind of the thing. Like people inherit the feelings and opinions of their parents, And I mean, like you'll tweak it a little bit, but your parents' opinions are going to be passed down through you. And if like your parents like raised you to only use the word Zionist as like a thinly veiled like cover for their anti-Semitism, then like you're just gonna naturally develop that word and just like connect it to everything in that same vein.
Yeah. Are you talking about the Palestinians though, Jared? Like,
yeah, I mean, Palestinians either on the land or in diaspora. That's kind of what I mean. Like that's the way I've seen a lot of them use the word Zionist, and a lot of the times the way I hear them use that word, it's very easy from interchangeable with Jew.
But that would give an argument, I think, by many Palestinians, Jared, that between anti-Semitism and it becomes an anti-occupation. I think they have that difference in their mind.
Oh yes, of course, and I'm not denying that it's anti-occupation. The point that I'm trying to make here is that their anger towards the occupation has made them particularly susceptible to anti-Semitism. Yeah, that's the point.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is anti-Semitism as a big picture. I feel as though on a one-on-one interaction, it's not the same kind of anti-Semitism. So I have a hard time calling a Palestinian anti-Semitic for that feeling, even though it would be attached to them, like denying Israel's right to exist, so on. I would be hesitant to call them anti-Semitic for that, because I don't know, it just.
Yeah, I think I can understand Italy, though, right? Like it's very easy to hate Israel because you feel that you're being oppressed and there's apartheid, or whichever way you see it. But then that's different to hating Jews as individuals, not too hard to get from one to the other.
Yeah.
And I believe that most don't oppose the Jewish connection to Israel or the right to self-determination. Those who want a peaceful solution, well, at least the ones I've spoken to, the I would say the moderate crowd. And most people are Zionists without even knowing that they're Zionists. Honestly.
Yeah. Well, because the values of Zionism are so universally accepted. The only thing people don't like about Zionism is the word Zionism. That's kind of what it feels like.
Facts.
Absolutely.
Would you all identify as Zionists publicly?
Yeah. I mean, I do. Aboud's in a bit of a different situation.
Yeah, that's that's fair to assume. I mean, you see, we have been here in the land for way before Zionism as Samaritans, but I think it depends. How can you exactly define Zionism? Because, it is connected with Jewish people having the right to live freely in their own land, right? I mean,
autonomy and Jewish connection. That's what it is. It's Jewish indigenous liberation. It's not. It's not time bound as much as the other side paints it. And I don't blame you for being hesitant to use that word because of how stigmatized it is. It just goes to show that as Jews, we need to be more, and allies, we need to be more empowered in sharing our story and taking control of our narrative.
Yes, but he's not Jewish.
Jews and allies, I'm saying, if Jews made it clear what Zionism is, Aboud would probably be comfortable with it because he agrees with Jewish self-determination and that Jews are connected to the land. So that's what
I just learned. You're right. I just learned that well, first of all, we are definitely we have friends from both sides, and I learned throughout my internet browsing career, and the internet that you can really easily offend someone just by even saying, for example, that you might call Palestine Israel, you might call it Palestine, okay, or the opposite, vice versa. And there's no way you will find people who don't like that, and you'll find people who don't like that. I had a debate that happened to me live in real life there was a documentary about the Samaritans, and there's these two people, one Palestinian, one Israeli. In the film, I say the Samaritans lived in Palestine for 2,000 years. Now, I don't really care exactly, I didn't really care what I said, but they took it to another level. The guy came and confronted me. Hey, you said Palestine, and then this girl overheard him, and then boom, we have a debate in the middle of the theater now. It was
so you had a Twitter fight in real life. That's epic.
That's the worst.
Yeah, they were just going back and forth, and I was trying to calm them down. But we are in a kind of, like you said, it is for me hesitant to use specific words.
Yeah, but you live in the West Bank, you live on Shechem, right next to Nablus. So it's also kind of understandable why you would be hesitant to openly call yourself Zionist, considering who your neighbors are.
Yeah, definitely. It's generally we don't use the word Zionism just because it's kind of complicated. We do use the word Samaritan to identify ourselves. Just that's the word. But are there Zionist Samaritans? We're only 800, maybe.
This is kind of the point, though, isn't it?
Isn't it hard for the Samaritan, maybe the Palestinian community around you in Shechem to call themselves Zionists because they see Zionism as the entity that came onto the land and took over and is now there's a military occupation. So it's very hard for the Palestinians. So maybe, part of the reconciliation process that needs to happen between Israelis and Palestinians is to understand that Zionism can live alongside Palestinian autonomy and Palestinian freedom.
They use this term.
And it should.
Yeah.
There's no liberation if both peoples aren't liberated. And Zionism is Jewish liberation.
For sure.
There is this term that is used by the Palestinians about Israel. They don't use it when they don't use the word Israel or the word ihtilal, which means occupation. There's another word which is in Arabic we say al-kayan al-Sahyoni, which means the Zionist entity. They use that also.
I was on
So-
someone's clubhouse who would say, "Don't call it Israel, the Zionist entity. We
Oh,
don't
right.
speak
It's
to
like,
Zionists." I was like,
you
I
know,
was like, Clubhouse
That's
is
the
crazy.
brooding on.
yeah, can I go a bit off kilter here for a quick second? Because I want to say, because like I've heard from a bunch of other Jews who have had like people say, "Oh, don't say Israel, Zionist entity," and stuff like that. Like my cousin Sivan, when he went to school in Rockville, Maryland, had that same issue with Algerians, and like you say that for over there in Montreal. Meanwhile, like I went to school with there were Palestinian kids at my school, Palestinian Americans, immigrants from Yemen, from Egypt, and all of them, like whenever I said Israel, they would just be like, "Oh yeah, sure." Like that's one thing I've never had. I've never had somebody, especially from my Arab friends, tell me like, "No, it's not Israel." The most I would get out of them is like, "What is it like over there? What's it like being a Jew? What does Hebrew sound like? Can you say a couple words for him?"
Do you
I'll just be
speak
like, "Yeah,
Jewish?
sure." Yeah, do you speak Jewish? That question, oh
Jewish.
my God. So many people ask me that. So eventually one day I just decided to mess with people because kept getting that question, "Do you speak Jewish?" So I just be like, "All right, listen up. Let me tell you a phrase."
That's
That's
straight
how
out of
it
the Family
sounds
Guy
like.
episode.
For them.
Yeah. The funnier thing is that these dumbasses fell for it. They thought that was an actual phrase.
What school did you go to, Jared?
I went to a public school in a broke-ass state. That's where I went to.
Uh-huh. Right. Okay. So Isabella, what do you think is really the key to getting the two sides to converse with each other on the grassroots level? Because it's very hard to get people to actually be willing to engage with one another.
Yeah. Oh,
So I'm so happy
Sorry.
you asked that question. Have you guys heard of the Israel Policy Forum podcast? It's a great
Yeah.
podcast. Not as I don't know if it's as amazing as this one.
oh, of course. This is the best there, obviously. Everybody
on a
knows.
podcast. The nerve of me. But
Yeah.
there was an Israeli professor from IDC, and he was explaining the whole reconciliation process and how to bridge the gap between these two groups, Israelis and Palestinians.
Mhm.
And it was interesting because he said, and it really made sense to me, that a lot of the conversation is not about the wall, the security barrier, whatever you want to call it, not about the land. It's about recognizing each other's suffering and humanity and believing in the other side and trusting the other side. And we see this. Sorry, someone's upstairs.
Yeah.
Um,
Recognizing the legitimacy of the other's narrative.
Yes, that too, but also recognizing that the other side, you can trust them. I know in both societies, like okay, even if we make peace with them, they're gonna turn around and not really follow it. Especially
Definitely.
I growing up, you know, I was in Jewish day school for 12 years. It's a sentiment that I kind of had, like, oh, even if we make peace, and then it'll be like Gaza, it won't work out. And what was really powerful, this professor said, was that if you show Israelis or Palestinians that groups are able to change their mind and they're able to change, even if it wasn't Palestinians, they were 30% likely to give up more land or be able to make more, to give more and to be more moldable in their decisions. So I think a lot of it has to do less with the actual what's happening, and first on a grassroots level is to actually begin talking with each other and having the conversation of what does a Zionist mean. I tell some people I'm a Zionist and they say, okay, you're a baby killer. It's like, I haven't killed anybody, I promise, you know. And if you guys are bored, you can check my TikTok and see the horrible comments that I get all the time. So I think it's coming to know each other's narratives. What do you think?
Do you actually get that, Isabella? Like, do you actually get people telling you you're a baby killer? Like,
absolutely. Yeah. Please go on my TikTok. Someone made a video about me yesterday.
Oh. Well, I mean, I don't touch TikTok.
Saying, okay, you're too cool for TikTok. It's a very impactful platform, I will say.
Is it really though? I've seen some of the stuff people post around there.
If you want to,
I don't know.
This is where all the young people are, and if you want to have your ideas out there, well, why not? At first, I laughed, but now I get paid to do it for other organizations. So it's actually, it could be impactful. Depends how you make everyone. People.
I appreciate the hustle.
Young kids are on there. If you want to push a story, have a say, well, gotta be in it. But yeah, I actually do get that, Amir, a lot, and it's not just me, it's many Jewish creators. And my little brother skipped from school, and just the other day someone made a video about me saying that I control their For You page, and it was a whole thing. I was like, you think I control your For You page? I wish I had that power, sis. Like,
Well, I mean, of course, you used your evil Jew powers to do it.
well,
Everybody
yeah,
knows
Got
it's
Jew
how it
power.
I
is.
had to miss the World Zionist meeting and controlling the
Yeah.
meeting for this.
Yeah, I mean, hell, we're late. We're
pretty
late for
nuts.
our Zog meeting, by the way, guys.
Yeah, I know.
You know, I actually
I
have
wonder
a
how many
story
people
about.
watch this know what Zog means.
I actually have a story about the whole child killer, baby killer thing. I have a buddy of mine who was out in Thailand after he served in the army for 3 years, and he was with a friend of his in a bar, and they were talking to a couple of ladies from, I think they were from Wales, so they were British girls, and they were talking this and that for 15, 20 minutes, and things were going well, as you would say. And suddenly they got onto the topic of where they were from. The girls asked, "Oh, where are you guys from?" And they were like, "Oh, we're from Israel." And the faces just dropped. The atmosphere just changed completely. They started calling them murderers. They started saying how they're doing this, and this. And my friend just kind of took it for a while and then started getting really, really upset. And he just grabbed his phone and he said, "Look, I was in this and this unit in a fighting combative unit here. You can call any one of my friends from there and ask them if they're child killers or if they've ever killed any children. We don't know where exactly you're getting your facts and your information." So I think there's actually a huge, huge problem out there in the world with misinformation and disinformation when it comes to Israel-Palestine. And that really leads on to my next question for you, Ysabella, which is, as a student out in Canada, how is the Israel-Palestine conflict viewed from on university campuses over there, and what's the kind of vibe? Is it toxic or is it a productive vibe?
It's pretty much exactly what you said in prettier words, in more academic words, to be honest with you. That's exactly how I feel, and I think a great page that showcases the Jewish experience on campus with regard to the conflict is called Jewish on Campus on Instagram. And they have so many testimonies. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but they really do a great job. I definitely feel that the conflict is one-sided on campus, and it's a monolith of ideas. I actually wrote a paper explaining my views on BDS, and my teacher said, "Well, you're too close to the conflict. You don't really have an opinion. Like, you can't really write this." I still went ahead and wrote it.
You're too close.
He assumed you have bias, or
Yeah, as soon as
I mean, if that's how it works, then nobody can have an opinion on anything that goes on in their country.
not to mention,
Like if you're a Canadian
what's
citizen,
done.
you're too close to Canada. You shouldn't be able to vote in like who gets the seat in Parliament. You're too close.
Yeah, not to mention I'm born and raised in Montreal, so
Yeah.
I'm pretty close. So not to mention also the readings that she gave out, but it's definitely not a place for dialogue. I spoke at the UC Irvine BDS vote. It was awful. White colonizers. I was called European. Clearly not European.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. It's like look. This is my theory on it. It's like people want to hate Jews. I mean, like, especially in Western societies, anti-Semitism is so deeply ingrained that people will just accept it. Anything that makes Jews look bad. Even in today's climate, people want to imagine Jews as white, even though we really aren't. Even Ashkenazi Jews, which most of us look white. I mean, like, even Ashkenazi Jews, most of us look white. We're only white when it's convenient for white people, at least in America.
Well,
I don't know about
Canadian
Canadian
because Ashkenazi Jews are not white. Literally.
Yeah.
Ashkenazi Jews are as Middle Eastern as Mizrahi Jews. We're from the same land, and it's actually deeper than that. The anti-Semitism from the left, the way it's guised as activism, it's way more sinister, and it's deep, and it's deep-rooted because it's fully an ideology, settler colonial. The words that we use, the language that we're using, even calling Jews settlers, it
Yeah.
can be triggering to some, because how can you
Right.
settle a land you're indigenous to? The Jewish
Yeah.
identity is not connected to Israel when you're talking to this specific group of people, and that's extremely wrong, as Israel is an integral part of Jewish identity. You can't separate that. So
Yeah.
it's actually deep end. It's we see it on campus, and we see it through events too. I was at an event at my college, my former college at CJEP in Montreal, it's called. So I have a weird time calling it college. It's CJEP.
Yeah.
And it was from South Africa to Palestine BDS. And when I raised my hand and I was saying, well, how is BDS effective? If Palestinians does their job, and how can I be a part of this event if there's no room for me to advocate for Palestinians as well? Because I want to too. And one of the speakers even said Jews are terrorists, and then she said, "Oh no, never mind, Israelis." This was the kind of event.
Yeah, Jews are terrorists. That's a slip up if I ever heard one.
Yeah, right.
You know
And
exactly.
That's what put a finger in my face. It's shocking how it goes completely unnoticed. This kind of misinformation and hate. It's hate via misinformation.
Well, yeah, I mean, it kind of proves the point of why we need a country of our own, our own states, because, like, no matter if it's on the right or the left, anti-Semitism exists. And the way I always explain it is that the left wing provides the intellectual arguments to excuse the violence that you see right-wingers commit. That's kind of the way I explain it. Because, like, whenever there's a synagogue shooting, it's always, like, a right-wing populist. But then when you see people who are demonizing Jews on TV, not engaging in physical violence, they're just, like, using their words. It's a different type of thing, but that's the way I always explain it.
There's confirmation bias, I see, among the Palestinians that,
of course.
You are expected to use terms of settlers, for example, like, Jewish settlers. So that's also, I think, in a big way, it is confirmation bias. If all your neighborhood and all your nation think like that, you're more prone to have this kind of ideology and thinking. So it just makes sense. But I think that the way the education system and how it raises them and what it teaches them on the Israelis is really important. And it isn't perhaps good these days in many ways, I think. So yeah.
I agree. It's also a larger trend that we see amongst the left. If Dr. Seuss is canceled, we can agree with that or not, but if you disagree with it, you're canceled. The cancel culture is real, and it's this monolith of ideas. It's supposed to be, liberal and ideas, and school is supposed to be a place where we exchange ideas. And I'm not someone who's super far right in saying this. I'm saying it as someone who, as a Jew and as someone who's Zionist, I have a hard time even saying the word Zionist on campus without being, looked like, wow.
That really negates the whole point of education, and hearing the other. I don't understand how a word can make so many people feel upset, especially on universities where it's supposed to be a place for learning and educating and a place to grow.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. It's getting fed. Sorry.
No, I was saying progressive is now confused with being sensitive. Like, to be progressive, you have to be overly sensitive to things. And what I see as well, which is what I think is one of the major obstacles we have as well, is the apathy that we have amongst central Israelis. Like, I'm the one that lives most in the center here, and people in this part of Israel especially couldn't care less. They're completely oblivious to what's going on with the Palestinians. Do you know of any ways we can incentivize those Israelis to actually take an active interest?
That's a really good question, because when it's something like BDS putting pressure on the Israeli government on wrongful, baseless premises, like we know that BDS propagates, it does not want Israelis to negotiate, talk, or show any interest. It's a great question, and a lot of Palestinians who I've spoken to have taken that approach and have taken the approach of from a negative side. I personally believe that positive reinforcement is better. I think that probably in the education system, it's something that should be taught more, or if Israelis do the army, I think that Israelis who are in the West Bank, Judea, and Samaria should speak fluent Arabic. That should be mandatory. So that would cause less tension, and that would humanize the other side a little bit more, and maybe less fear mongering in politics, or more grassroots movement, action on that end. Because I do believe it comes from the people and not from the government. We often forget that the government works for us and not the other way around. So,
I'm a firm believer in that too. The government's a little bit, it's very corrupt at the moment, and really they're happy to perpetuate the violence and the conflict because they benefit from it. None of us do, really. But the government,
both leaderships do. I mean, the PA only exists at this point to just mine money from the Palestinian cities, and the Israeli government is basically just there to manage it. Like, they have no interest in doing anything. Keep the status quo. As long as I can get 30 seats in the Knesset in this upcoming election, I'm golden. That's
or whoever
pretty
you
much
want to make a coalition with, either whatever. Like, Bibi will make a coalition with anybody who will form a coalition with him, and we've seen this. But I don't know what you were saying about the corruption. When I went to Rawabi, I was shocked. Have you guys been there?
Ruwabi?
Yeah, in area.
I know where it is. I haven't been there.
I haven't.
I've heard that. Haven't been there. Only
crossed from there. It's a pretty modern city.
It's
comparing.
gorgeous. It's like the Mamilla 2.0.
Yeah, isn't Rawabi that city that the Emirates paid to build?
I think it was Qatar.
Qatar. It was some Gulf state. That place where they're so rich they import an entire race of Indians to do all the work. One of those places.
They have like the largest it's the largest amphitheater in the entire Middle East. But my point about this is that it's empty. It's literally such a gorgeous city in Area A, fully PA authority. And the reason it's empty is because the Palestinian Authority will lose their main negotiation point of the Palestinian way of life and doesn't want them to have a good quality of life. And when I saw the ghost town, I was shocked. I was like, wow, what a shame. So
I think it's also expensive to live there.
Yeah. So I mean, dude,
but it was funded. It was
place.
funded by a lot of philanthropists. There was also a secret Jewish philanthropist and an Egyptian one, and an Egyptian Jew, and another Palestinian, Bashar, I think his name is. It was
Bashar al-Masri, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, our unseen partner has just let us know. Yeah, Rabi is a ghost town because it is expensive. Our unseen partner is our Palestinian who.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He doesn't feel so comfortable being on camera.
Yeah.
Say again, Ysabella, sorry.
On the tour, that wasn't what they were saying, but I'm sure your unseen partner knows more.
Yeah, he's just saying it's too expensive for people. What he was saying is that it's a ghost town because it's too expensive.
But they also have 3 currencies somewhere in Rawabi, no? Like, they have a weird way of, they don't use.
They have shekel, but I think they have dinar too.
Yeah, and I think something else as well. I remember it being 3 currencies as well.
Maybe the dollar. Everybody uses the dollar.
They do use the dollar a lot.
Yeah.
It's good. Hey, look, the dollar is good money. It's really good money.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, sorry, go on, Abu. Do you speak?
I mean, no, I just have this, this, I don't know, I can call it a phenomena that it makes me think. So when Israelis want to visit any religious place, for example, in the West Bank, take, for example, Joseph's tomb, we have a Joseph's viewpoint here that you can only view the tomb from far, but you can actually go and visit the tomb in Nablus, but under one condition that you are, some IDF should be with you or something like that. It makes me think now, are we going to do this forever to make people only go with the IDF? Because the problem is the way many Palestinians explain it to me, when they know the IDF is there, they go around and they come more, problems happen. And it makes me think, about how is the two nations gonna finally kind of get together. It's more complicated than we think.
Yeah. But isn't it Area A? Aren't Israelis not allowed in Area A in general? So that's why they.
Yeah, they're not allowed.
Yeah, you're right.
But I mean,
that's why they need IDF.
Who's gonna stop us though?
Yeah.
They go there
it's easy
with
to get in.
like we say.
But there's also a huge lack of trust, and you see like
Massive lack,
the mother who was murdered, and that doesn't speak for everyone. That speaks on one individual who did that. But media will blow this up. So it boils back down to what we were saying before. There needs to be a grassroots effort, people to people, to break this. And
I personally think that we need to learn from historical mistakes. So for me, the disengagement from Gaza happened without a plan for peace, without a roadmap for peace. And it was literally a trauma for Israel. The army came in and came in and took Jews out of Gaza and displaced its own people in an attempt for peace that didn't actually turn out to be that way. We've had 3 big wars in Gaza since. So I think that any type of solution that displaces anybody is just a big no-no. Everybody needs to stay exactly where they are in the houses that they currently live in, and the solution needs to be built around the people. We need to kind of think of something that will be functional, and we've actually had a podcast recently, Ysabella, with Rafi, who him and the Palestinians are here sat down and created a federation model, which was very interesting.
They made a whole constitution, boy.
Yeah, a whole constitution, really interesting project. And so I think it's time to really start to look at different models. And something you mentioned, Abood, the other day as well, really played in my mind, because you said that, if Palestinian West Bankers were in the situation that you're in and have a Palestinian ID, but also have the option to have an Israeli ID, potentially they could be living, in both societies and actually.
Yeah, like we've managed to. So even though, so we have a slightly different religion, but I don't think that can be the main problem. It's not the main problem. It's the fact that we have the same kind of rights, or not exactly the same kind of rights, but really important rights that some side might not have. For example, Israelis being able to access Palestinian land and vice versa. I think that Samaritans can only do that. Why not everyone? So
exactly.
It sounds simple. I know it's harder on paper, but I think it's important. So
Well, I want to bring something up before I forget to bring it up. Is that when it comes to any type of real solution to this whole conflict, the population we really need to convince is the Israelis. We hold the cards. We don't just hold all the cards. We hold the entire damn table.
I disagree with that. I think Israel has a greater responsibility because Israel is the greater power amongst the Palestinians. But we saw, like Amir mentioned, there was a unilateral withdrawal from Gaza, but it wasn't done in coordination with Palestinians. It was Israel alone. The Israeli government didn't work with anybody. So Israel also needs a partner that really help Palestinian leadership.
I'm not saying that we don't need a partner. I'm just saying that if Israel really wanted to, any solution the government could think up, they could just straight up go into the PA offices, find the person that would agree with what they want, and go, "You're in charge. We can do this." I mean, we really could. I mean, legit. If Israel wanted to dissolve the PA if we wanted to.
No. Within the PA, there's different factions.
Go on, let Ysabella respond.
Yeah.
I think even within the PA, we see the PA, it's not a united, government either. There's different factions too. And within it, there's about 4 bigger camps. And I heard it was actually the same podcast that I listened to the other day. I'm happy to listen to it. So even if Israel were to come in, if it's through force, what it sounds like you're describing, that's not an effective solution to peace. At least in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying it wouldn't lead to violence in the short run. I'm just saying that with the amount of cards Israel has in its hands right now, force could be an option to the Israeli government. The Israeli government just hasn't wanted to use it.
Every government.
I'm not saying the government should use it.
But it's not an option. Now with the Abraham Accords, how could that even be on the table? and the way the ICC was happening, it's not even on the table. I don't even think it's an option for Israel. And even if it were and there was no public opinion, I don't think it would even work because even Abbas is not favorable. There's talks about Hamas coming to the West Bank. The Palestinians are not one camp. They're also not a monolith of ideas too. We have the Likud, Meretz. They also have their different ideas within the PA too. So I have a hard time seeing that.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
Like if there's different factions within the PA, Israel could, even if it wasn't entirely by force, they could do some behind the scenes stuff. The Mossad's really good at that, and just maneuver somebody that's favorable to them into the position. That's not even a new idea. The U.S. has done it.
It's not as easy as that, Jared. It's not as easy as that. It's not as easy as maneuvering people in and out of positions like you think it is. You know, it's not.
It is with enough cyanide.
Look at the vaccine situation. Israel can't even save face with the vaccine situation at all. The PA was saying we don't want to hear from Israel. We're independent. They want it to look good. They're talking to Russia. Then after they said, "Oh no, well you have to," and then they did. With such a simple situation, not simple, but relatively simple to what you're describing, still didn't work out. Israel could not save face and still looked awful in the media. So
we're talking about Israelis giving vaccine to the Palestinians, or
my point is that which was such a simple task, simple compared to solving the whole West Bank situation, vaccination coordination.
Simple.
How can Israel maneuver this?
Let me pull it in another direction. What do you guys think at this point will happen? Like if you had to put money down on what you think the next 30 years would look like, what this land would look like by Israel's 100th anniversary, what do you think would happen?
People are learning.
No, you shut up. Ysabella, you start. You're the guest. Ladies first.
Because I disagree with you a little too much.
No, it's not. Look, I don't care that you disagree. I'm here to talk and learn. I'm just keeping the conversation going. Don't worry about it.
I'm just joking. What I think it will look like in 100 years, I think it depends on. I think the left-wing parties in Israel are going to make a comeback. I know short-term it doesn't look as great right now because of the Likud and this, but that's just how politics works. The left wing is going to have to make a comeback, and Israel was founded on left-wing principles as well. So perhaps settlements in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, are going to increase. So in 100 years, I do see more access there. But a part of me feels like it's going to stay the same. But I want to be hopeful. But I don't see Israel giving up much land in the West Bank.
Yeah.
Especially after the Trump plan. It's not feasible. Ma'ale Adumim, all these places, they're cities now.
Yeah. Also, I want to point out our unseen partner agrees with you. I think it's because he thinks you're pretty.
No.
You don't even know what the man looks like. Anyway.
I have good points. It's not because I'm pretty. I'm sure your unseen partner is cute. No shade to your unseen partner.
I've got a question for you, Ysabella. With regards to the Jews in the diaspora like yourself, right? How do you feel that you can reconnect and help support Israel from afar? Because as you know, in the last kind of 10 years, there's been a bit of a wedge between diasporan Jews, especially American Jewry, and Israel. What can we do to reconnect with our brothers and sisters across the globe and really get them loving Israel and promoting a solution over here with the Palestinians?
So I was recently asked to join the World Zionist Congress and bring a Canadian party there.
Really?
Yes.
How do you get an invite to that? I want one.
And so that's what I was trying to say. I forgot. Yeah, so my take on Jews in the diaspora is that Jews should not have a say in Israeli politics. Only Israelis should have a say in Israeli politics, not Americans, not because America gives Israel aid. Israelis should have a say only. And I see a lot of diaspora Jews engaging in this kind of talk. We can have our opinions, of course, and we could help form policy that we think is good for the respective countries that we live in. But as a Jew, my connection is to the land. It's not to Bibi. It's not to anyone in the government. So I think that a lot of diaspora Jews are tasked with defending Israel right off the bat. So right away, we know the talking points. What is Zionism? Natan Sharansky's 3Ds of what is the litmus test, what is anti-Semitic. So I think the best way to bridge the gap between diaspora communities and within the land is to talk to people. And I know it's cheesy and I keep saying that, but I went to a Jewish day school and we had our sister city in Montreal is Haifa. And I ended up actually going to a school in Haifa. I think it was an elementary school called Afik. I don't know how I remember that. And it was just experiencing people and really having a love for the land and not seeing ourselves as, the oppression. And our rights as well is not because Jews have been persecuted. No, it's because we have an indigenous claim, a historical claim, a tie. And that's the part of decolonizing Jewish identity that we're still doing. It's like the phase 2 of Zionism. So I think the phase 2 of Zionism is something that Israelis and Jews in the diaspora and allies could participate in. If that makes sense.
No, I get that. That's pretty much the point I always bring up.
One second, Jared. 1 second. I think that one of the major incentives that we could have, because actually our unseen partner also just mentioned this, but I was about to anyway, is that economically, especially in terms of the tourism industry, I think the benefits to there being peace in this region of the world would be immense. But people are too short-sighted right now to understand that. Like, who wants to go interrailing around Europe when you can get on a train in Israel, go to the pyramids in Egypt, then move on to, it would be a way better, more beautiful place to, right?
That'd be cool as hell. I'd love to hop on a train and just go to Giza and see how far they would let me climb up the pyramid before they would hit me.
We need peace before that can happen.
That's the best idea.
Well, we have a peace treaty.
Go ahead, Ysabella, what do you think?
I think that's the best idea I've heard. I mentioned that it should be from somewhere, a place out of love and a place of something that's positive and positive reinforcement. I just didn't think of that as the option. And we see that now from Dubai to Tel Aviv. And absolutely, that's a good idea. I think it's better than the boycotts and all that other stuff. It clearly hasn't worked. So time to innovate. And I think it's going to be even more effective now that we see Israel forming relations with other Arab countries and also for Israelis. Because now Israelis, perhaps they see Palestinians as their enemies, but it's not Arabs as a whole. It's
you know what, Ysabella, I as an Israeli, right, who served in the army, I don't view Palestinians as my enemy. I view anyone that is part of a terrorist organization as my enemy because they are my enemy. It's as simple as that. But I hope that one day, both us and them would see things a little bit differently. And the only way to make that happen is to come to some kind of deal. And personally, I think that, again, we need to learn from history. We need to look at successful deals. We need to look at the Good Friday agreements. We need to look at other peace deals and agreements that were made between fighting factions and make it a reality on the ground. And I think what Kane mentioned there, the tourism, really, it can be like one of the major factors in solving this conflict. And just a quick plug, me and Abood are tour guides ourselves. So, anyone wanting to visit the West
We're not even at the end of the show and you're already plugging.
Let it be quiet.
Question for you.
Keep it quiet, mate. Keep it quiet.
Yeah, I think tourism is a great way to get the two people together, really.
Yeah.
I've been a tour guide since 2009, and one of my most interesting tours was when I had really Christians, Muslims, and Jewish people together, and they spoke 3 languages, and I had to switch 3 times languages: Arabic, Hebrew, English. Arabic, Hebrew, English was an interesting experience.
That's gonna mess with your brain.
We got it.
Yeah.
But it's awesome.
You speak 3 languages. Okay, it's fine.
Oh no, 4 actually. Yeah.
You know what, Abood? If you get me drunk enough, I could speak Russian. So there.
Okay, I'm up for this challenge.
I'm up for a challenge. Like next thing you know, I'm gonna meet up with Abood. He's gonna get 10 beers in. He's gonna start speaking Mandarin.
No, man, alcohol. You should try Samaritan Ark.
Amir, I have a question.
I love that.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Sure.
So Amir, you mentioned that we have to learn from history very often and that we need to form a plan. So one issue that I have with the federation idea is that we're still making lines, and another issue is it's often the name. Will Israelis be able to give up Israel? I personally wouldn't feel comfortable with that.
Yeah.
No,
that's,
I can-
that's also
it makes
my
me-
main issue with federation.
Yeah,
can-
that's the biggest thing for me.
No, I completely
Yeah,
get that, and I think that there is a way of holding on to
Yeah.
everything within one
too.
plan. So, like the way I would see any type of federation that would work feasibly on the ground, you wouldn't actually be dividing up any land in terms of like ABC, how the Oslo Accords work. You would literally be cutting up land into like boroughs or local council areas that are part of a larger state. So everything from the river to the sea would be one state, including Gaza as well in a federation model, right? But each one would have its own autonomy and governance over its specific area, which actually allows, places like Hebron, which are a bit more conservative, to live that a bit more conservative lifestyle, and places like Ramallah, Tel Aviv, to be more liberal and to have shops open on Shabbat and, to live the way they want to live. I think is very, very crucial to the land here, because we have so many different ideologies. We have from the extreme right to the extreme left, and different religions and different. So I think each area needs to have its own kind of autonomy to do what it wants. Because who am I to say what goes on in Modin Elite or Betar Elite? I'm not Haredi. I don't know what the needs are of that town or city, but I'm sure they know a lot better than me. And with regards to the name, I would look at it very simply, right? At the moment, you have Israelis that see all the land as Israel, and you have Palestinians that see all the land as Palestine. So,
Internationally,
pardon?
Hatikva, internationally, agreements. What
In both.
Like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
At the UN, Israel will be seen as Israel by Israelis, but
Yeah.
what is it going to be seen by the world?
Oh,
So
Internationally.
in a federated model, right? If you were to go to a federated model, you could have it, you could call it the Holy Land, and it could be the Holy Land of Israel and the Holy Land of Palestine. And that's that. Something we shouldn't be fighting over words. We shouldn't be fighting over, it was this, it was this, it was that, because it's true. There was a kingdom of Israel here 3,000 years ago. There was also a kingdom of Judah, right? And there was also Syria, Palestina, and there was also June, Palestine. So, if we go back to name, if we're arguing over names, that's really kind of, we're getting sidetracked off solving the real
Yeah,
issues.
I think it's
Yeah.
more
might
than
cause
that.
problems.
yeah. Also, one thing, guys, we're coming up towards the end of our segment here, but I got two more things that I want to bring up to Isabel. This first one's from our unseen partner. Also, here's before we get to that, here's another thing from our unseen partner. He said, it doesn't matter for Palestinians what the world calls the land. They want something to happen.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah. And the next thing he wants to ask, then what do you suggest for real peace in response to you saying, like, being uncomfortable with the federation idea?
Good
So
question.
it's not that I'm fully uncomfortable with the federation idea. It's that I think that it's one of the best ideas so far, because it's different and it respects the framework of the Middle East. Country. We think Israel's young, but all the countries surrounding Israel are just as young, if not younger, or a little bit older. It's not a Middle Eastern thing, and Palestinians, are also tribal, like the Al-Masri tribe from like it was never divided the way it was supposed to be. And we see the British have done this pretty much all over Africa, India, Pakistan.
Yeah.
So the federation, to me,
Kane, Amir, it's on you.
yeah, the more we divide, I don't know. I do think that right now what we need to do is work towards freedom of movement for all peoples. And that comes with education, that comes with normalizing each other, reforming PA textbooks, having Israelis be a little bit more open as well, or do some work on that side, more just knowing who each other's narratives, recognizing the Nakba, maybe not on May 5th, maybe not on Israeli Independence Day, on a different day. But I think
And
it's
people just talking to each other. I think people underestimate how much can change when you really actually sit with like a person who, like from Palestinian to meet an Israeli in person and talk. That really clears a lot of air and makes you experience something on a deeper level.
overall just making the situation better for what it is right now.
Yeah.
If we can take off that wall and reduce not have terrorism, just making it work without anything formal, I think is really effective. It avoids a lot of stuff.
I mean, you do have a point. We really should, rather than thinking grand, like this is a plan that's gonna end everything. We really should start smaller.
It's an incremental process. Like,
yeah, exactly.
The big mistake we've been making all along is thinking that we can solve it all in one fell swoop, which is so stupid. You know,
like we should probably just plan the first step, not the end goal.
We have countless years of history. It goes like further back than just the 40s, and it goes back hundreds of years.
When you said we have countless years of history, I thought it was like, oh, that's a poetic way of saying we have all the time we're ever going to need to fix this, but then you went backwards, so I was just like, oh.
Yeah.
To be honest, guys, I actually think that it's actually kind of perfect timing this decade for finding a solution or a roadmap to a solution, because there actually hasn't been a war now. There's been attacks, and there's been rockets, and there's been terrorism,
but there's been like no military offensive.
Yeah, there's been no war now in 7 years. Now that to some people that may sound like not a long time, but for over here it actually is.
I mean, to my ears it sounds like 7 years. God, we're due. Holy shit! Everyone gets
So I do actually think
it's definitely been quiet in a good way, I guess.
Yeah. I'm not saying that the quiet's been bad. I'm just saying.
What's that, Ysabella?
Oh,
I think the next one will probably be with Lebanon tensions there.
You think?
Wait.
Probably.
I hope that does make sense.
I hope not.
Yeah.
From what I see,
We all hope not.
To be honest with you, the Hezbollah are very, very weak at the moment within Lebanon after the explosion that happened in Beirut. Their public opinion has actually turned very much so, and Lebanon's a country of mixed people, there's Druze, Christians, Muslims, Shia.
Dude, even the Shias, their main constituency are mad at them. Like, that's how badly Hezbollah has fucked up. The Shia are mad at them.
Yeah.
The issue is that they're like Lebanon's military wing. It's like Lebanon's IDF. They need to reform that to truly come out.
Oh yeah. Dude, Lebanon could be such a rich country if only it was run sensibly.
Well, it was the jewel of the Mediterranean before the Civil War,
that's what I'm talking about. Like, that's what I'm talking about. Like, if they could get an actual government in, that country would be so rich. I would love, by the way, if we ever get a peace treaty, I would love to just go party in Beirut for like a week and then stumble drunkenly back to Haifa.
Well, my uncle did that. Minus the party.
I bet our unseen partner's gonna have an
Having
opinion.
A Jordanian ID helped him. So.
Oh yeah.
How long ago was that, Abood?
Sorry.
How long ago did he visit?
Oh, he went there 3 years ago.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
At the border, they were like, "What are you going to do there with the name Cohen?" They saw the last name Cohen, and his first name as Husni. I'm like, "What are you going to do in that place? What would you have?" Yeah, we was actually invited by a famous show there for an interview.
Nice.
He said it was really, really beautiful there. Really, really beautiful in Beirut.
Guys, our boy has already partied in Beirut. I'm so jealous.
Yeah,
I'm so jealous.
My uncle, you mean? Yeah.
It's ready.
No. Yeah. Our unseen partner.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So one more thing before we come out of time here, because I want to ask, because somehow this ended up being on International Women's Day, and you're one of the few female guests we've managed to get. So I have to ask you this question: the women of Zionism, what's their place in it?
The same as men.
Same as men? You don't want to go into that? Any particular women you want to celebrate?
Oh, so okay. So I guess I thought you meant what's their place as in like now.
Yeah.
So, obviously, the first woman that comes to mind is Golda Meir.
Of course.
But a current woman that I really am, fangirl of is Nitzana Joyshner from Shurat Adin. She does amazing work, defunding terror. She's super impactful with what she does. Her book Harpoon is super cool. I think she takes an innovative approach to doing great things and really stopping terror through the money. So she would probably be the first person that comes to mind. And we see Gal Gadot doing her activism in a low-key way that's still effective. And she's Wonder Woman. Of course it is. It's normalizing Israeli identity.
Yeah, I guess that's true. It's always. I mean, it's always fun to see an Israeli kick a German in the face in World War I. That's always fun.
Yeah, no, I think she gets complained about a lot just because she is Israeli and people like.
Yeah, that's definitely.
The role is Cleopatra.
I remember that whole controversy. God, that was a stupid one.
Yeah. You see,
people are just like, she's not brown enough to be Cleopatra. I'm like, y'all know Cleopatra was Greek, right? Not only was she Greek, she was also thrice inbred.
What?
No, literally they were. She was okay. Hold on. Now we're gonna go off into a history before we end this.
The Ptolemaic was black.
No. She was a Ptolemy. The Ptolemies were a Greek Macedonian dynasty that ruled Egypt after Alexander the Great conquered it. And when he died, his generals carved it up. And his general Ptolemy took Egypt, and his whole dynasty became known as the Ptolemaic Dynasty of Egypt. They were Greek. And yeah, they took Egyptians as concubines. But the main issue that a lot of people see is that, because in Egyptian royalty, there was a lot of inbreeding. But they didn't do it mainly through inbreeding. Like, they married their sisters a lot in ancient Egyptian royalty. And the Greeks wanted to appeal to their Egyptian subjects, so they started doing that too. But they forgot the one crucial thing that all the Egyptian pharaohs did, where they would also bring in a lot of consorts that they weren't related to, just to keep the gene pool from getting too small. So the Ptolemaic dynasty was a Greek Macedonian dynasty that conquered Egypt, essentially. And by the time of Cleopatra, she is like 3 or 4 times inbred of people marrying either their sisters or their aunts or their own mothers, not even joking. The Ptolemaic family.
This beautiful depiction like we see in the movies.
I'm sorry. She looked like an average lady.
Even though it's probably true, I can't accept it. Yeah.
Look, just because you can't doesn't mean it's any less true. I'm just saying it's really amazing that a woman who spoke 7 languages came from a dynasty that would be very at home in the hills of West Virginia.
Very okay.
Yeah. But anyway, West Virginia is kind of a great place to end it.
Beautiful.
So anyway, guys,
yeah, absolutely.
Isabella, thank you for coming on. It was great to have you.
Thank you,
guys.
This was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Really, that was fun. I hope you come back again.
We enjoyed it a lot.
And don't forget, whenever you're near Har Gruzim, give you a free tour.
Yeah.
Next
Come
time
on by.
Get on a plane for sure.
Yeah. Come on down. We'll go to the Baha'i Gardens or anything. I just need to ask. But anyway, guys, Cleopatra, thrice inbred. It was also Greek Macedonian. Episode over. No one can argue with me.